Have you ever looked at one of those giant oil refineries with all the pipes and towers and just wondered, what's the one thing that stops a small fire from turning into a complete disaster? Well, it's probably not what you're picturing. It's more like an invisible shield engineered right into the bones of the plant itself.
And look, your first thought is probably sprinklers, right? Maybe giant fire trucks on standby. And those are important, for sure. But the real first line of defense is way more fundamental. It's built in from day one.
You literally build it a suit of armor. That's the best way to think about it. The technical term is passive fire protection, or just fireproofing. It's basically this special coating, this engineered shell, that's designed to do one thing: buy time. Precious time for people to get out safely and for emergency crews to get a handle on things.
So how do you design something like that? Well, looky for us, we've got the blueprint. For this little tour, we're going to use one of the most detailed and respected guides in the world, the Saudi Aramco Engineering Standard for Fireproofing. This document lays out exactly how to build that protection, piece by painstaking piece.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Well, you can't build a shield if you don't know where the attack is coming from, right? So the very first step, our first stop, is all about mapping out where the danger actually is.
It all starts with what the standard calls fire hazardous equipment. And we're not talking about your kitchen stove here. We are talking about the heavy hitters. These enormous pumps, compressors, and heaters that are moving massive amounts of flammable stuff around. And what kind of flammable stuff are we talking about? The standard gets super specific here. It defines a flammable liquid as anything with a flash point at or below 54 degrees Celsius. Basically, that's the temperature where it gives off enough vapor to catch fire. You know, things like crude oil or gasoline. This is the fuel that could feed a potential catastrophe.
So you've got the high-risk equipment and you've got the fuel. You put those two together and that's where you get this really critical concept, the fire hazardous zone. And this isn't just a circle drawn on a map. No, this is a three-dimensional bubble, an envelope of risk that wraps all around that dangerous equipment.
And how big is this bubble? The standard is very clear. It extends out horizontally, of course, but the key number here is vertical. It goes up 9 meters from the ground. Yeah, we're talking about the height of a 3-story building. Anything caught inside this high-risk zone has to play by a whole different set of rules.
Okay, check this out, because this diagram really shows you what I mean by three-dimensional. See how the dangerous equipment is sitting up on that elevated platform? The protection zone doesn't just start up there with it. The standard says, no, that entire support structure, everything underneath it, inside that invisible 9-meter-high box, all the way down to the ground, has to be protected.
All right, so we've got our map of the danger zone. For our next stop, we're stepping inside that zone. We're going to look at the very first line of defense, protecting the plant skeleton. We're talking about the structural steel holding the whole thing up.
And here's the thing you have to understand. Steel doesn't have to melt to be useless. A big petrochemical fire can easily get over 1,000 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, steel loses more than half of its strength. It starts to get soft, and it can buckle and twist under the weight it's holding, just like a candle left in a hot car. And that can lead to a total collapse.
This is a perfect before and after shot, right from the standard. On the left, you've got a regular old pipe rack. On the right, you see what it looks like after they apply the fireproofing rules. See how all those main vertical supports inside the danger zone are now coated in that protective armor? That's what creates a tough, resilient skeleton that can take the heat.
And this is where the engineering nerd in me just loves it. The standard doesn't just say fireproof the steel. Oh no, the level of detail is incredible. So supports for a big vessel, they need it, unless the vessel is super close to the ground. A vertical column inside the zone, it needs it, unless it's already made of thick reinforced concrete. Even the cross bracing has to be coated, but the anchor bolts holding it down are specifically exempt. There's a reason and a calculation behind every single rule.
Okay, so the skeleton is solid, but a plant isn't just a skeleton, right? It's got a nervous system, it's got arteries. So for our next stop, we're going to see how the standard protects those critical lifelines, the systems that absolutely have to work during a fire so the plant can be shut down safely.
A huge piece of this puzzle is emergency valves. These are the gatekeepers that can shut off the flow of fuel to a fire. And the logic here is really simple and smart. It's like a little flowchart. First question. Does the valve have a big spring that automatically pushes it to the safe position if it loses power? If the answer is yes, awesome. All you need is a little link that melts in a fire, releases the spring, and slams the valve shut. But if the answer is no, then the whole shebang has to be fireproofed. The actuator, the power lines, the signal lines, everything.
And believe me when they say the entire system, they are not kidding. It's not just the valve motor, it's the control cabinets, the pressurized air tanks that might power it, all the little tubes and pipes connecting everything, and, this is so important, the power and signal cables that carry the shutdown command.
Okay, this detail is absolutely wild. For those critical cables, you can't just wrap them in a fire blanket and call it a day. The cable itself has to be designed to be fire resistant. It has to go through this brutal test like one called UL2196 to prove that it can still carry a signal for 20 minutes while it is literally being cooked in a furnace. That's the only way you can be sure that the shutdown now message actually gets through when it matters most.
We've covered the where, the what, and the why. For our last stop on this tour, let's look at the materials themselves. What is this high-tech suit of armor actually made of?
Well, you've basically got two main flavors. On one hand, you have dense concrete. Think heavy-duty, old-school, super durable stuff. It's perfect for coating big, simple steel columns and beams. On the other hand, you have these materials called intumescent mastics. Now, this stuff is cool. It's like a thick paint that, when it gets hot, puffs up like a giant marshmallow. It swells to many times its original thickness and creates this thick, insulating layer of char. And because it's lighter and can be sprayed on, it's perfect for protecting complicated shapes, like those valve systems we just talked about.
But here's the deal. It doesn't matter which material you use. It has to meet this one single, non-negotiable requirement. The standard says it right here. It must have a minimum fire resistance rating of 2 hours. 2 hours. In the world of firefighting, that's an eternity. It's more than enough time to shut things down and get a proper response going.
But you have to understand, this isn't just any fire test. That 2-hour rating comes from a test called UL-1709, and this test is especially brutal. It's not like a slow-burning house fire. It's a rapid rise test, designed to mimic the violent, instantaneous flash of a hydrocarbon fire. The temperature in the furnace just skyrockets to over 1,000 degrees Celsius in the first 5 minutes. To survive that for 2 hours is a truly incredible feat of materials science.
So as we wrap up our little tour here, the biggest thing to take away is pretty simple. Safety at this scale is never, ever an accident. It's the result of decades of learning, of trial and error, all captured in incredibly detailed standards like this one. It's resilience, by design, built into every bolt, every beam, and every cable. It just makes you wonder, right? If all of this thought and detail goes into just one safety system in one type of industrial plant, what other invisible engineering is out there, quietly protecting you every single day? In the bridges you drive over, the planes you fly in, or even the phone you might be watching this on. It's kind of amazing to think about.
If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, How to Do It. Search for us at How to Do 5 for even more interesting content.